Good morning, good evening. Please be welcome to the International South-South Cooperation Seminar on the demand for vocational training in the textile and clothing sectors. My name is Nathanael Lopez. I'm a program officer at the Brazil Ilo South-South Cooperation Program. I will be presenting the seminar in Portuguese, and we will have simultaneous translation for Arabic, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Just choose your language channel in the bottom part of the Zoom screen. The objective of this event is to foster experience sharing on prospective studies on the textile and clothing industries in the four participating countries: Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Turkey. This international seminar is a joint initiative of the ILO, the Brazilian Cooperation Agency, in partnership with governments, employers, and workers' organizations from the four countries and the Brazilian Cotton Institute, IBA. The seminar is also being held with the support of the following projects: Cotton with Decent Work and the Future of Work in the Textile and Clothing Industries project. Our conversation will be steered by the following topics: future of work, vocational training, and analysis of future vocational training needs in the textile and clothing industries. We will be joined by tripartite representatives and industry experts who will help us put into perspective the challenges and opportunities. The seminar is divided into four parts. First, we will have the opening and inaugural session. Next, in session 2, we will address the methodology and the process of construction of the recommendations in the four countries that were mentioned already. In session 3, we will also talk about the main recommendations and their implementation in each of the four countries. And finally, we will summarize the debates and close. Before we start the opening, I invite you to watch a video about what will help us contextualize the event even more. The ILO has analyzed the impact of technological advances on the future of work, and decent work in the clothing and apparel in the next following years. One of the main conclusions is that vocational education is a key component in facing the challenges, and new competencies are essential for companies and workers to adapt to the new technologies, new materials, and to the growing need of offering products that are environmentally sustainable. That is why in 2020, in partnership with the government of Brazil, workers associations, employers associations, and the textile industry, the project called Cotton with Decent Work covered the demands of the future of vocational education needs in Brazil. We use the model of the Brazilian studies to understand the tendencies in organization and technology for the coming years, using input from several institutions and social dialogue. This process has culminated with a focus on institutions of vocational training, government, syndicates, institutions, research institutions, and sectoral institutions, because together we will develop strategies to improve and foster sustainable growth and decent work facing the post-pandemic challenges we face. It is my project. It is. I am now very proud to invite Ambassador Rui Pereira to open this activity. I also welcome the Regional Director of Latin America and the Caribbean, Vinicius Ferreira, welcome, and the Director of the Sectoral Policies in Geneva at ILO, Alec Van Leur. Please feel very welcome. We will now invite the representative of the Brazilian government, Ambassador Rui Pereira. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Good day to all that are here with us in this seminar. Good morning to our friends who are with us in this opportunity. I'm sorry I don't speak Arabic. I wish I could also salute you in this very important language. I would like to use this opportunity to salute my colleague members of this board, Director Alet Van Leer, and all of you who are here with us, and Director Vinicius Pinedo. It is my great pleasure to open this international seminar where we shall present and discuss prospective studies on the demands for vocational training in the textile and clothing industries, which were undertaken in Brazil, Peru, Ethiopia, and Jordan, thanks to international technical cooperation. I am honored to be part of this unique opportunity for dialogue and knowledge sharing between countries as diverse as Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru, as I said before, who nonetheless share similar challenges in their respective economic and social development processes. And especially in these extremely trying and sorrowful time of grief and suffering, yet also of renewed hope, solidarity, and empathy, which all of us are experiencing in the world's most varied latitudes. Due to the pandemic phenomena, which is a hallmark of this moment we are going through. Ladies and gentlemen, the core of the Brazilian Cooperation Agency's efforts as the main body within the Brazilian international cooperation system is capacity building and knowledge sharing with the purpose of gaining local autonomy to devise and implement locally owned solutions that are tailored to the challenges that each partner country faces in its individual development cycle. For the Brazilian Cooperation Agency, cotton is of great importance because a large number of projects that structure the Brazilian Technical Cooperation Project for developing countries are dedicated to cotton. The Brazilian Program of Technical Cooperation in Cotton is designed and implemented and I would like to emphasize this aspect, in close collaboration with our partners, countries, and international organizations, and includes initiatives such as the improvement of cotton production, the very important aspect of decent work in the value chain of this commodity, distribution of cotton byproducts associated with school feeding programs in an overarching system which includes important social economic aspects, among others, which allow us to strengthen and disseminate not only the recognized competitive advantages of cotton culture in relation to other value chains of the textile and clothing sectors, but also to enable the exchange of knowledge among excellent institutions, public and proven, Brazilian and from partner countries. In this framework, I would like to highlight the very important role of Brazilian cooperation and the very important role of Brazilian private and public institutions in the cotton sectors are very important. I believe that the interchange with these institutions through international cooperations has helped identify problems and build innovative solutions between Brazil and cotton growing countries in Africa and Latin America to improve our policies and actions throughout the production chain of the cotton sector. The purpose of the present seminar, as our moderator has said, is exactly allowing a comparative analysis of these prospective studies for the clothing industries in the countries referenced. This prospection is designed to foresee the new labor needs of the textile sector and thus provide more and better qualification and specialization to the workers, creating added value to what is produced by each country and always keeping the perspective of promoting decent work and placing it as a development and wealth generation motor for countries. This way is it's an all win-win situation. During the working sessions of the seminars, we will see the similarities and diversities that bring us together and distinguish us among the four countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that no one can be unaware that the cotton value chain as a whole is also suffering the impacts of the new coronavirus pandemic. On behalf of ABC, we are committed to continue to design innovative solutions for the enormous difficulties that are a hallmark of this challenging and unprecedented moment we are going through today, together with our very valued partners. At the same time, we shall implement the needed measures to continue to carry out the Common Cooperation Project. The very realization of this seminar, now virtually, corroborates the precedent statements. We shall not abandon the commitment, the energy, the determination, and the dreams that drive us each day, one day after the other, so that Brazilian South-South cooperation continues to be outstanding and recognized as a very useful tool to overcome current and future challenges of the cotton sector with decent work in Africa and Latin America, even during the pandemic, which will soon be, we hope with all our hearts, post pandemic times. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your words. Let's hear now Dr. Vinicius Pinheiros, Regional Director of ILO for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Director, you have the floor. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this event. Let me just adjust something here. Well, initially, I would like to thank Mr. Ambassador Rui Carlos Pereira from ABC for the support and engagement in the cotton sector, and I would like to thank our Director of Sector-Based Policies at ILO, Dr. Mrs. Alech, and I would like to thank the representatives of the authorities who are attending here from Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordania, and Peru, as well as representatives of the employees and employers and others. I would like to welcome the representatives of the civil society, the academia, and other participants, in addition to the colleagues from ILO and interpreters. It's a great pleasure to attend this event that's been attended by members from different countries, from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, who are here to exchange experiences, diagnosis, and recommendations about the future of vocational training in the textile sector. In 2021, the pandemics will continue to impose challenges, unprecedented challenges to everyone, and it shows that it's essential to continue promoting the social dialogue, which is key to creating consensus in a tripartite way in order to share knowledge and disseminate information that will help pave the way for a post-pandemic, which will include social justice, which will have social justice And this is work at the core of technical cooperation. And as everyone knows, in the last few months, the geopolitics of the access to vaccine, especially in Latin America, is showing again the strength of the South-South cooperation. And it's important to emphasize that in such a crucial moment where literally lives are at stake and economies are collapsing, which is the countries of the South that the Latin American countries have found more opening and flexibility related to the access of vaccine and access to technologies and the sharing of inputs. So this will never be forgotten. This will be a landmark in terms of South-South cooperation and will help the economic development for the future. We are in the moment, in a watershed moment, where we recognize who is a friend or foe, or who are the closest countries to us in a moment where lives are at stake. It's important to emphasize that in the textile sector employs millions of employers, especially female employees. I, I find it important to emphasize this in sectors that are essential for socio-economical development, that provide products for interest into global supply chains, as is the case of cotton, which, and it's important to emphasize that the hydrophile cotton is also part of the set of inputs that will help facilitate vaccination. And there will be no shortage of such products. And Brazil has also cooperated with other countries in order to prevent the shortage of cotton, especially with Northern America, with the countries of the North. And this industry has a history of precarious conditions of work. And a landmark, a milestone in this process is was the collapse of a plant which killed 5,000 employees. And also there is the environmental impact, especially regarding solid wastes that go to water. And these concerns have been broadened given the context of the pandemics. There was a shortage of the demand, a decrease of the demand, and there was an imbalance between the providers and those who are demand, which this has forced the closure of millions of plants, and millions of employees have lost their jobs. And there was a digital revolution, a kind of a fourth industrial revolution that impacts textile industry plants, and that's why it's essential to invest in skills, in long-term skills. We should think about the role that we could have in this future uh, paradigm of the textile industry in the future. And this event is intended to present the prospective results of vocational training in the textile and cloth industry in Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru, which are powerhouses in this area, and also provide recommendations. I should emphasize that this event is carried out in the context of South-South and bilateral cooperation, which is based on the principles of horizontality, non-conditionality, and solidarity. And I would like to congratulate also the Brazilian government, which is contribute with funds and efforts in order to promote the improvement of the cotton production and work conditions in the cotton industry in Latin American and in African countries. It's important to emphasize that in economical terms, Brazil seeks to promote the increase of the productivity and the technology. And in social terms, it helps ensure the improvement of the production accompanied by decent work throughout the cotton production chain. And that's why ILO is working in partnership with Brazil. And being from ILO, I have followed this work because this is a very innovative project which seeks, in conjunction with Brazilian institutions, promote decent work in specific chains, especially in Paraguay and Peru, but also in Mali and Mozambique. So it's operating several different works. I would like to emphasize also the work that is being carried out by Senai, which has been a champion in order to for vocational training in industries, especially for the exchange of technologies, prospective technologies with other countries. And this geared to vocational training, which has an essential plays an essential role for rebuilding the sector after the pandemics, and also it intends to help the company face the demographic, technological, commercial change that will impact the textile production in the next few years. In the case of Brazil and Peru, these recommendations were elaborated in a tripartite way. So it's important to emphasize the participation of workers in this process, as it should be. And in this sense, I would like to link to this work what, that the need for having a recovery, a post-COVID recovery, should be centered around people. So now, more than ever, it's important to talk about people, about the individuals, and about the collectivity, because this was what stood out with the impact of the pandemic. And finally, I'd like to mention this should be linked to the 2020 agenda for the sustainable development. So actually, when the pandemics came, everything went awry. So now we're trying to put the train back on track, and it's necessary now more than ever hit the gas. And thank you very much for inviting me to this virtual conference. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Pinheiro. I now hand the floor to the director of the headquarters in Geneva, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rui Pereira, Regional Director Vinicius Pinheiro. Ladies and gentlemen, bom dia. It's really a great pleasure for me today that you have invited me to provide a few opening remarks at this South-South Cooperation seminar on the future skills needs in the garment and textiles industry. As indicated by the regional directors we just heard, the background for our deliberations today is the profound and rapid impact that technological advances, climate change, democratic shifts, globalization and geopolitics are having on production and work across the garment and textile supply chains. These drivers and megatrends have created an increasingly uncertain and unpredictable future for employers and workers in the industries. The starting point for our deliberation should be the Centenary Declaration on the Future of Work, which was adopted by the International Labour Conference in June of 2019. It was agreed by our 187 member states and sets out a human-centered approach to ensure a brighter future for all. The unpredictable and devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the challenges and complexity that governments, employers and workers in the textiles and clothing industries face. The highly globalized sector has suffered from both demand and supply side disruption, and this is on an unprecedented scale. This has caused thousands of factories to close and millions of women and men have lost their jobs. The recovery process for the industry is likely to be slow, but paradoxically, it also offers opportunities. The recovery will likely accelerate the rapid digital transformation already underway. The global supply chains of the industries are being re-engineered and may look very different in the future. Also, COVID-19 may offer a unique opportunity to advance decent work for more women and men. The industries may also have a rare opportunity to embrace environmental sustainability. and circularity to ensure that the industry become more inclusive, productive, and greener. In this global context, today we meet to discuss the future skills needs of the garment and textiles industries. Reports show that there are important skills gaps. The skills needed to drive the industry forward and to benefit from the digital and green revolutions are lacking. A recent industry survey said that 57% of companies are struggling to find the skills they need to innovate. Governments, employers, and workers from Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru have already taken significant steps towards anticipating future skills needs and also finding solutions to future opportunities and challenges. Their efforts highlight a common goal: to use skills forecasting and inclusive skills development to help grow the garment and textiles sectors sustainably, and to ensure better, decent work opportunities for the millions of women and men who work in the industries. The ILO has supported the work of governments, employers, and workers in the 4 countries in 2 different ways. 1, by contributing to forecasting skills and compiling the findings in a forthcoming report on future skills needs in the clothing and textile sector in Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru. And number 2, by supporting social dialogue among governments, employers, and workers that have resulted in clear recommendations for skills development in the 4 countries. During the past year, it has become apparent that constituents in the 4 countries have a lot to learn from each other, and that other garment and textile producing countries can also learn from these experiences. This webinar presents an important opportunity for participants to share the results and the findings of their work. I also hope that there will be time to discuss the implementation of recommendations and share good practices and lessons learned with counterparts in other countries. There is a recognition that skills policies and strategies will be essential in the future to ensuring the continued growth and sustainability of the industries. Skills development can play a role in advancing gender equality, diversity, and inclusion for all workers. In Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru, strides have been taken towards using skills development and lifelong learning to promote the future sustainability of the industries. However, these are just the first steps. For a brighter and sustainable future for the sector and to build back better after the COVID-19 pandemic, we must continue to invest in developing skills in the sector. We must also implement the recommendations that have been made, developed through social dialogue in Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru. With these thoughts in mind, I look forward to the discussions of the webinar today. I hope everyone in the webinar will seize this unique opportunity, jointly shape a better future of work for the garment textiles industries in the countries. And finally, I would like to express my appreciation and thanks to the government of Brazil, who supports the work in Brazil and Peru, as well as the organization of the webinar. I would also like to thank the government of the Netherlands, who supports the work undertaken in Ethiopia and Jordan, as well as the production of a forthcoming global report. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Muito obrigado, diretora Alete, diretora de sector da sede da
Thank
OIT em
you,
Genebra.
Alette. I would like to thank Mr. Rui Pereira once again, Mrs. Alette van Leur for their important participation in their opening speeches. Thank you very much.
Olga, we are all aware that the ILO Centenary Declaration on the Future of Work emphasizes the need for a human-centered approach and further recommends building competencies, skills, and qualifications for all workers during their entire working lives. So, against this background and in view of the pandemic, we would like to know how the ILO is supporting the implementation of this declaration in the vocational training domain, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start from thanking the ILO colleagues from the sectoral activities department with whom we have collaborated on the preparation of the report for the 4 countries for the textiles and garment sector. It has been a wonderful collaboration, and I believe and hope it will be very fruitful as well as a discussion during today's webinar. I also would like to thank the donors who supported the project and the Brazilian government for supporting the organization of this discussion today. So before we dive into the sector and the situation of the skills needs in the textiles and garment sector, I just would like to provide a little bit of setting the scene for skills development in the context of the future work and why it is in fact so important to identify skills for the future. Several of the previous speakers have already mentioned the global drivers of change that shape the situation on the labor market and the way we work in many and very complex dimensions. So these are the drivers of change which I mentioned here, but these are not exhaustive, and perhaps there are some other drivers that may be specific also to this or that sector, including textiles and garments. But we can be sure that these drivers do play an important role in shaping the demand for skills. The most important one, of course, is technological change and digitalization. You know very well that there are many discussions about how automation, robotization, and artificial intelligence may shape the demand for skills and the whole job generation and replacement. There are fears that many jobs may disappear, and the estimates vary a lot between 10% to 50% of jobs. While in fact we know from our research that of course there will be also a positive employment effect creation of positive effect of employment creation in the future. However, what is important that the new jobs which will be created will be quite different in its character, in the composition of skills, and therefore in the skills demand. The same concerns globalization and trade, which is also changing under the pressure of digitalization, where also competition is increasing, including the competition for talent, which is available worldwide, not only due to the increased mobility of labor, migration, which is another important driver of change, but also because the access to talent becomes virtual. And basically you can access very different types of occupations and very different types of skills online. This of course makes the situation of people who are low skilled and people who are disadvantaged and do not get the same access to training and retraining even more disadvantaged, with the potential threat of opening scissors in the growing inequality. Climate change is another important driver of change. In our research, we know that if the world is implementing the commitment to the Paris Agreement and really is trying to diminish the global warming to 2% or ideally 1.5% as a maximum, we will need to implement important scenarios, such as the transition from the fossil fuel-based energy generation to the renewable energy generation, and also to a circular economy. These two scenarios alone potentially may generate more than 100 million jobs globally, but they may also put at stake some 80 million jobs if retraining, reskilling, and upskilling is not provided efficiently for those jobs that are disappearing into those jobs which will be created as a result of the green transition. Demographic change is also an important driver, because we know that in advanced economies, the labor force is already shrinking and is creating the situation of labor shortages already now, which will be a continued trend in the future, while in many low-income countries, the situation is still young and growing. And of course, that would also generate the increased mobility of labor in the future, and in fact, the need for that, but also the need to recognize the skills which are spreading across the borders, so that we do not really brain drain low-income countries, and at the same time do not waste the important qualifications and talents that are spreading through the borders. So all these drivers of change, of course, generate the questions: which jobs will be sustained, which tasks these jobs will generate, and what kind of skills and qualifications they will require. In the context of all these drivers of change, we are now also going through the COVID-19 pandemic, which accelerated many of those drivers, including digitalization and technological change in general, but also at the same time appearing as a major disruptor on the labor market. The ILO recently has issued the update of its estimates on the loss of working hours. And we already know that for 2020, 255 million of equivalent to full-time jobs basically were put at risk as a result of working hour loss. What does it mean? It means that around half of those jobs will not come back. They will not rebound in employment. About half of those jobs will go under, either into unemployment permanently, or may even result in the inactivity. From the skills development point of view, any longer term unemployment, and especially inactivity, also means de-skilling. So the world, when we will need to build back better, we will need all the skills to increase productivity and implement new technologies, will be actually at risk of not having these skills. So therefore, skills development play in the context of the COVID-19 also a role, not only in the immediate response measures to the economic crisis and in getting people back to work, but also building back better, building more resilient society and economy, and implementing also longer term recovery strategies. While implementing diagnostics and skill needs anticipation and forecasting across very different sectors, we always find that this is the composition of skills which will be needed in the future. And this is actually the complexity of these 4 types of skills that make the society and economy successful. So these are foundational skills. These are basic skills that, such as literacy and numeracy, which are required as a good foundation for further learning, for any lifelong learning. These are core work skills, as we call them, or transversal skills, including soft skills or transversal technical skills that help people to move from one occupation to another, from one sector to another. And they become an employment security mechanism, if you want. These are, of course, specialized technical skills that are required specific for the jobs and sectors where the jobs are situated. And digital skills. So digital skills become the new transversal phenomena which are required across very different jobs and very different economic sectors. And I have to underline that when we speak about digital skills, these are not only basic digital skills. This goes really well beyond that, because they are also highly specialized digital skills at the advanced level, which are also specific for different sectors. Some speakers already mentioned the Centenary Declaration. So before the Centenary Declaration was adopted by 187 member states, there was also work of the ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work, which concluded that the human-centered agenda for the future of work has to be based on 3 pillars. And the main pillar is investing in people's capabilities, along with investing into institutions of work and investing in decent and sustainable work. So the Centenary Declaration confirmed that conclusion and committed to promoting skills, competences, and qualifications for all throughout working lives as a joint responsibility of employers, individuals, and government. And this is the key, because if we know that around 30+% of jobs will change in its nature and its content, the composition of skills will change. It will require massive reskilling and upskilling. And massive reskilling and upskilling can only be done throughout working life and can only be done if there is a commitment from all stakeholders to co-share the responsibility in financing. And the same concerns effective lifelong learning and quality education for all. That speaks for access to education and training opportunities, including the disadvantaged groups, but also organizing the system in a way that would allow also people to recognize their skills, utilize their skills, and be successful contributors to decent work. Why sectoral approaches? Sectoral approaches are very important in our work. We implement sectoral approaches very frequently in our branch. Because when you work at the sectoral level, it is very easy to identify the key drivers of change in direct collaboration, discussion, and dialogue with social partners and other stakeholders from the sector. And usually also the partners in the sector are very clear and very interested in working on identifying skills and also on skills development. It's also easier to establish some coordination mechanisms, collaboration, and dialogue. It also is easier to understand what skills specifically will be needed at sectoral level, because if you try to implement, identify a strategy at a national level, the task becomes almost too large. At sectoral level, you can go into details of specific competencies, specific skills, specific levels of qualification, and also discuss whether the current training provision is relevant to the demands of the sector and what has to be changed. It's easier also to agree about the commitment of all stakeholders to implement those decisions. So apart from the deeper insights, we can also link the decisions to industrial policies and investment decisions and to broader agenda, policy agendas such as investment, technology policy, employment policy, environmental and climate change policy, and technological policy. That's why at sectoral level, we really welcome this collaboration with Department of Sectoral Activities. And we think that the example of the report which you will hear and what you will discuss today is a very good example, which may bring also to a better strategy at sectoral level to implement that, a better commitment from the side of all stakeholders to implement that strategy, as well as very good grounds for sharing the knowledge and sharing experiences through South-South and triangular cooperation between the 4 countries involved in the study, and share also the approaches such as the one which was mentioned by Sinai, or such as the approach of the ILO, which is STED, Skills for Trade and Economic Diversification, which also contributed to work in Ethiopia and Jordan. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to share. And these are some of the examples of ILO outputs on skills development. I will welcome you to visit our webpage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga, for your very enlightening presentation. And now we will move on to the next session.
I'm happy to say that we have more than 130 people connected live from very different countries. That's one of the benefits of having a webinar. I'd like to tell these newcomers that we have the translation channels for English, Portuguese, and Spanish and Arabic. So all you need to do is go to the bar at the bottom and select the language. Now we're going to talk about the methodology in the recommendations of the future of work in the 4 countries. Before starting, I'd like to say that you can ask questions or make a comment in the chat, the Zoom chat. What I'd like you to do is to identify your country, say what country you come from, and then ask your question or make your comment. And then the panelists will read the comments and answer the questions. I call to the floor Mrs. Cunha, Beatriz Cunha, a sectorial specialist for textiles, clothing, leather and footwear. Marcelo Pio, the industrial development specialist for the National Service of Industrial Training, SENAI in Brazil. Dennis Freitas, Under Secretary of Human Capital of the Special Secretary for Productivity, Employment and Competitiveness in Brazil. Dr. Kais Al-Safasfi, Director and the Technical and Vocational Skills Development Commission of Jordan. Sergei Teksesalasi, Researcher of Policies. He was a consultant in charge of the National Report for Ethiopia. Emmeline Arancel, Director General for the Standardization, Training and Employment and Certification of Labor Skills in Peru. All these, good morning. Welcome, Emmeline. Each of you panelists will have 5 minutes. I ask you to be careful to only use this space of time of 5 minutes. Beatriz, you are in a privileged place to have an outlook of the 4 countries of Latin America. Can you make an analysis, a comparative analysis of the recommendations and solutions found in all countries, or 4 countries?
Obrigada, Nathanael. Obrigada, Nathanael.
Thank you, Nathanael. We can hear you.
Beatriz, we can't hear you right now. Can you hear me? Yes, now we can. We can hear you, Beatriz. We can see your screen. It's a PowerPoint presentation, but it's minimized. Yes, there. That's much better. So, as I was saying, that it is a pleasure to be here, and that I would like to explain a little to you how this global study on future training needs was developed. It all started in 2019 with another analysis which was made and published by the Department of Union Policies. This analysis was on the impact of the future of work on decent work and the textile industry. This study concluded that the impact of the future of work is going to be very different in middle income countries compared with the countries in the least developed countries and in high income countries. I think there is one thing that all these countries have in common. It is the need to prepare for the right manpower, a manpower that can meet the needs of the industry, and the trained workers who can make the most of job opportunities, and also the need to guarantee decent work for them. And so the issue of professional training emerged as a crucial element in any analysis of the prospects for decent work in this sector. The Ilo Declaration, which has also been mentioned here by several speakers, reinforced this understanding of the study to guarantee that all countries, all employers, all workers, governments adopt measures and professional training policies to prepare the industry for this new moment. However, no one was prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic, as mentioned before by several speakers. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating impact on the industry issue. Today, we see once again that we are seeking solutions in professional training. So it is therefore a great pleasure to be able to be here today with specialists and players who live the issue of professional training on a daily basis, and to be able to discuss these solutions. The study aims to, identify, it analyzes the sector and its performance in countries as different as Brazil, Ethiopia, or Jordan. These are countries whose population, income, and employment in the sector are very different. They have a common element, though, that is a large percentage of women employed in the sector. The textile and clothing sector is considered to be one of the most important sectors for the entry of women onto the job market. In addition to these different national contexts and different development and production in the textile sector, the study applied different methodologies. In the case of Brazil, for instance, and Peru, the Sinai modeling perspective was used. In the case of Ethiopia and Jordan, another model was used, which we call STED at Ilo, and which was developed by our professional training department in Geneva. This model was applied in Ethiopia and Jordan, therefore. In each of the countries, social dialogue has worked in a very different way and has been applied in the sector in a different way as well. In the case of Brazil, although there is no national board for professional training in the textile sector, a working group was created to discuss the study's results and to draw up recommendations. In the case of Ethiopia and Jordan, this process already existed before this study. The process was therefore strengthened, and taking advantage of the already established mechanisms for social dialogue in each of these countries, it was able to deepen the debate on work and professional training needs. Finally, I'd like to mention that the focus of these studies was different depending on the country. To acknowledge differences, to value the aspects and characteristics of each country. In this sense, in Brazil, for example, the studies focused much more on the issue of technologies and Industry 4.0, while the Ethiopia and Jordan in Ethiopia and Jordan, they focused more on the needs of the labor market and job creation and on the issue of climate change. The recommendations that were discussed and then drawn up in each of the countries were discussed at different times and with the participation of government workers and employers. So today they form an important array of recommendations for professional training policies and strategies. And so now, seeing the various solutions derived from these studies being put into practice in each of the countries will be very interesting. Talking of which, I'd like very much to invite you all to share the experiences that you have developed in each study in each of your countries. In conclusion to the study, to this global study, I'd like to highlight a few points. Firstly, there is no magic formula for addressing these issues in every country. Each country has to look for its own vocational training system and the areas requiring to put more elements in focus. We will hear this on the panel presenting the study of the experiences of the 4 countries. Secondly, social dialogue is essential to build practical solutions, and solutions that can meet the needs and priorities of social players. Thirdly, some subject matters are common to all countries. There is a consensus among the 4 countries on the importance of strengthening the system of professional training and education, the importance of developing skills and competencies for the use of new technologies, and the importance of having collaboration between governments and employers and workers to build a vocational training system that is coherent with the needs of the labor market. I'd like once again to thank all of you for listening and to reiterate our interest, our commitment to continue working on this matter in the 4 countries. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. Your presentation was an excellent starting point for the next discussions. Before I move on to the next person, I would like to say that the person who choose your audio channel must also choose the option mute original audio. And questions and comments must be sent through the Q&A tool in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Now, I would like to invite Marcelo. As a specialist in prospective methodology at Senai, you were responsible for the Brazilian study, and you have actively participated in the process of designing the recommendations for Brazil. So I would like to ask you, which were the most important points in this whole process? Marcelo, you have the floor. I'm very glad to be here with you in this meeting. And to answer your question, Nathaniel, I would say there are 3 key issues for this process. The first issue, which is very direct, is generating information on the future of work, prospective information for a work chain that is extremely important for developing countries, which is the industries of clothing and textile industries, information that will allow companies and workers to contribute towards an increase in productivity, an increase in added value to the products, and bring a better quality of life for all workers who are in this chain. So this is a very relevant issue, which is not only speaks to the importance of prospective information for the world of work, but also because the chain itself is a very important work chain. The second point that comes to mind is learning. When we use a group of tools for perspective or the Sinai foresight model, it helps us to understand and learn more about the sector, the industry itself, and about the industry needs. And the third issue in this context is contributing to the process of strengthening of a culture of prospecting geared towards vocational education. This foresight culture geared towards vocational education and training is based, and this is the ground rock of the Sinai model of foresight, in all of the dynamics in terms of organization and technology through which companies must go. So changes in work organization, changes in the levels or technology levels that these companies must have, create a new demands and new needs for what is basically a new worker. These new workers not only but must need to carry out new activities, have a new skill set, new capacities, new knowledge for the process itself. Since this is a very dynamic process, we must always keep the process not only as a foresight, but actually applying the foresight tools to make sure that we keep up with the changes that happen in the world of work. And this worker who will always need to develop new activities, new skills, new capacities, new knowledges. It has a direct impact into the vocational education training in the programs for requalification and qualification of workers. Because based on the changes in this occupation profile, you will have a new curriculum and you will have changes in the delivery of adequate education and of all the budget that is dedicated to these programs. These changes obviously create a constant change for new teaching materials, new teaching strategies, and of course, basically at the core of it all is teacher training. So in a nutshell, this is the philosophy of the Sinai model of prospecting that we use not only in Brazil, but overall. So with this context, the Sinai model of prospecting tries to identify the gaps in terms of competencies, of what is needed today and what will be needed in the future, the skills for the coming years, and also try to determine the width of this gap between today and the future, and obviously try to find a model that will identify the new skills, activities, knowledge, and competencies for the next few years.
So this is at the base of the prospective model at Sinai. And then we have the schematics of the model or diagram. It starts with a prospective technology foresight stage. At this stage, which is the prospective stage, it is to identify not only the great trends, but the sectoral trends, and fundamentally, we go in depth in the discussion about the dissemination of technologies and the dissemination within the organizations and the countries, because each country is different from one another, and each country has its own modernization rhythm. So we have to identify this rhythm. Based on that, we can generate recommendations that are more appropriate and specific to the country when applying the model. So this is a very important part, the dissemination part, the dissemination of the trends in the market a long time. Within this technological context, we identified the different work positions that are more impacted in a specific sector because of the technological organization and how it occurs. So what are the changes that are occurring, and what impact will this have in this new technological and organizational scenario? So we identify these changes, the professional profiles, the skills, the competencies, and the new future demands for these new professionals and workers. And based on this technological and organizational context, we have then all the information to generate the recommendations to all the agents involved in a specific sector, in this case, the textile and clothing industry. So these recommendations have different levels. They start from a very general level and become more and more specific. We specify the profile of workers, of the offer, so as to prepare the new training courses. So this is more or less the model structure framework that was adopted in Peru, in Brazil. Thank you very much for your attention. I remain at your disposal should you have any questions. I cannot hear Nathanael.
Nathan, your sound is off. Thank you very much, Marcelo. We will continue in Brazil with a question to the representative of the Ministry of Economy, Mr. Denis Freitas. Good morning, Mr. Freitas. Welcome. In the view of the Brazilian government, how important are these prospective studies when planning professional training in Brazil? You now have the floor. Well, although this question seems simple, it is very interesting, and one should highlight that in all the work that has been carried out throughout this administration, that is from the beginning of 2019, as to the development of human capital policies, we were given the task of developing this assignment, this activity, in a more focused way and laying a much more greater weight on the real needs of the productive sector, such as the integration with policies to increase productivity, the footprint of the economy with Industry 4.0, and innovation. And so to contextualize, one could say the following. We made an assessment. We looked at past government policies which aimed at the preparation of labour, the main ones being PRONATEC, Plan 4 and PNQ. And we tried to identify what was good about these policies and what didn't work. In all the studies that we observed, one factor is unanimously acknowledged. That is the alignment between demand and supply. And that is the element that is missing in these policies. We see that the results in terms of employability, in terms of the social impact of these policies were very small, and in some reports even negatives, considering that you had people who were receiving the intervention of these actions and were not looking for a job, and therefore were not employed. And on the other hand, you had people who were doing nothing and got a job. So you had negative reports even under these policies. These were policies for which a lot of money was invested and with poor results. So this indicates to us that an inefficient alignment between supply and demand is something that has to be at the heart of human capital formation policies. And in fact, it is a pillar of the national qualification strategy that the federal government is now adopting to develop the initiatives. Studies like these, this study that is about to be presented, focused on the textile sector, where you have, of course, the expertise of SINAI, the National Industrial Training Service, which is an international reference in the preparation of labor for the industry in Brazil, and whose methodology is also applied abroad. It is the basis, for instance, for Center for policies, and several countries have adopted the spirit of the SINAI methodology. So it just shows that it is indeed a reference. And SINAI is an unavoidable partner of the Ministry of Economy in undertakings aimed at the preparation of labor. So methodologies, studies, processes like this are extremely relevant, and why not say determinants for the success of any human capital formation initiative for any sector. So from the point of view and from the perspective of those who work, of those who manage policies aimed at the development of labor, we see this with very good eyes, as this is very much in line with what we, from the federal government and at the Ministry of Economy, we are trying to implement in a transversal way in the policies, which is firstly an evaluation, the evaluation of the sector, the evaluation of needs, a fine evaluation, a detailed evaluation of skills and abilities, of the organizational culture of the sector, to have an understanding of how companies behave, of how the worker, when qualified, needs to adapt to the needs of the sector, both from a technical point of view and from a qualification point of view, and from a behavioral point of view too. To conclude, we just hope that initiatives and methodologies like these can be used in other strategic sectors for the economy, and that these initiatives can have a transversal impact on the economies of countries that have a vocation for these sectors, as in the cases discussed here. The 4 countries in which this study took place obviously have their peculiarities, their specific nature, and methodologies like these will certainly have an impact on the development of this sector and others in which perhaps this methodology may come to be implemented. So on our part, we see the study with good eyes and congratulate the initiative. We congratulate SINAI for the work carried out. And finally, I remain at your disposal should you need me for anything. Many thanks for listening. We are the one who thank you, Mr. Freitas. Now we are going to leave Brazil and go to Ethiopia. I would like to ask Tsege Tekleselasi. Welcome to you, Tsege. Tsege, we have already heard about the process of formulating recommendations in Brazil. I'd like you to hear now about the process in your country. How was it in Ethiopia?
Guy, can you hear me? I can't hear you. While the guy connects, we would like to say that Dr. Kais in Jordan had a connection problem and was unable to join us. We are still trying to put the link up again. Apparently, Mr. Tsugai has also had a connection problem. So we will go back to the Americas, and now I would like to ask Emily Arancel, Peru's Ministry of Labor and Employment Promotion Director. Director Emily, welcome, Emily. Peru's Ministry of Labor and Employment Promotion and the General Directorate of Standardization, Training for Employment and Certification of Labor Competencies are important partners of the Decent Work Project for Cotton. Could you share how the process of designing these recommendations happened in Peru? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Brazil, our brother country. And for all the learning that we were able to have, and for the model of decent work in our country, well, we have a special coordination to work with this matter from Brazil. The first focuses on logics, prospective work. The second issue is understanding vocational profile. As in terms of methodology, we have carried out, we have put together a multi-sector work group in the Ministry of Education, because we have a prospective study for the world of work, which has really helped us understand the future and the future demand and identify the need of knowing these future demands. In terms of occupational or work profiles, in terms of delivering TVET, we actually put in place a course in which we would learn how to apply prospective methodology, and this was based on the Sinai methodology. It was a stone and mortar course, so it was in person. Specialists from several institutions were present, like SENAX and CICLO and the Ministry of Education. For activity number 3, we actually executed 2 pilot studies, one in the value-added sector, one in the clothing sector. And this team drew up a diagnostics and study which will serve as a basis to apply the Sinai methodology with the aid of experts. The 4th activity is to diffuse as much as we can the results that we obtain. So we have 2 studies, both right now are at the stage of recommendations. I would also like to say that these recommendations will be published in all of the platforms. And the 5th activity has to do with achieving results. So we have a direction to how to put in place these studies with the aid of Sinai. So we identified six new occupations for our workers, and for clothing, we will have a specialist in development in systematized processes and a technological expert in the same processes, an analyst in textile management and communications. As lessons learned, this was very good for our countries. We can see that there are important steps that can give greater importance and help push the economic interests of our countries by looking into the best practices of each sector's organization. And the second idea is that these are always adapted. We must always be ready to change and apply what we have learned to other economic occupations. And the third is that we must be in touch with the representatives from the representatives of the companies, because we must try to find a balance for the demand in these occupational profiles needed in our countries, which will actually lead to a better result. And it will be possible to transpose this into a national policy. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish to thank you for being here. Thank you very much, Emily. Now, our consultant from Ethiopia, Tsegay Gidebrakian, please, Tsegay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at the South-South Cooperation webinar. So a bit of background, in Ethiopia, under the ILO Skill Up program, a number of projects were undertaken. And one of them is to develop a sector skill strategy for the textile and garment industries, as well as for agro-processing, and also the establishment of Sector Skill Council. So in the process of developing a sector skill strategy for the textile and garment industry, we did a background study, and also we held a STED workshop. And then, one of the sort of the demands that arose from the Sector Skill Council is to sort of study the sustainability of textile and garment industries in Ethiopia. And so the current project came out of demand by the Sector Skill Council. So it was timely, and also it was demand driven. So the report, as you already know, assessed the sustainability of the textile and garment industries in Ethiopia in relation to, one, technological change, and two, climate change and environmental compliance. And so it tried to examine the likely impact of this changes. These are the two drivers of change that Olga was talking about earlier. So the impact of this changes on jobs and skills, and then present recommendations for future skill needs. So really this report is important, and also it becomes even more important because Ethiopia is in the process of developing human resource planning for the coming 10 years. So when we come to the methodology specifically for the sustainability project, of course, we made use of the sector skill strategy that we developed in 2019. And in addition to that, we did desk review of related studies, such as the climate resilient green economy strategy of Ethiopia, CRG, and environmental assessment reports, and also data and reports from the Ethiopian Textile Industries Development Institute and other empirical studies. But most importantly, we had key informant interviews with relevant institutions such as the Ethiopian Textile and Garment Manufacturing Association, Ethiopian Textile Industries Development Association, GIZ, Forestry, Environment, Climate Change Commission, the Industrial Parks Development Corporation, Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, Ministry of Science and Technology, the Federal Civil Agency, the Ethiopian Investment Commission, the Jobs Creation Commission, and the Confederation of Ethiopian Trade Unions. So we really held discussions with the stakeholders, to sort of understand what they think in terms of, the future of skills in the textile and garment industries in Ethiopia. In addition to this, we also used information from a survey of 8 enterprises located in 2 industrial parks, in Hawassa Industrial Park and Mekelle Industrial Park. Both of them specialized in textile and garments. And then we came up with recommendations, and then those stakeholders that I mentioned, they gave their comments. ILO also gave their comments, and then we validated, the recommendations in Addis Ababa in the 25th of February. So I think we are in a very fast moving world in terms of technology and also climate change and environmental compliance, from the customer side and also from regulatory point of view. So it's very important that Ethiopia and other southern countries be prepared to to benefit from emerging jobs, and also to provide upskilling, reskilling to those jobs that might disappear because of technology change and also climate change. Thank you very much.
We thank you, Sergey. Unfortunately, we have very little time. We received a question. I'd like to ask each of the panelists to answer the question in 1 minute. Marcelo, the methodology, do you have a tool to validate the outcomes and results of the studies and surveys you conduct? That was for Marcelo. The same goes for Sergey, Emily, and Dennis. The new technologies, can they create or eliminate new jobs? This is a question that is simple, but it's difficult to answer, and you need to do it in 1 minute. Marcelo first. Yes. There is a tool. If you see the model, there is a stage where we do the monitoring. And during this stage, once we have applied the model after a certain amount of time, we apply the monitoring process only later, not immediately after the survey. After a certain amount of time, 1 to 2 years. After 1 or 2 years, we then do the monitoring of all the information that was gathered with the companies and the workers to see whether this activity and the capacity building and the training courses that were delivered in the companies, and we check the level of technology that the companies used during the survey. So this is a way of comparing what was perceived by the specialists some years before to what was analyzed now or more recently. We analyzed the professional profiles together with the companies and the workers. Thank you, Marcelo. Sergey, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a great question, but very difficult to answer. So in general, in the Ethiopian case, full automation is very unlikely. In the very recent years, one, it's very expensive. There's the, paying patents and also bringing technicians from abroad. It's a very expensive venture. And also in Ethiopia, still, even though productivity is very low, still labor has a competitive advantage. So it's very unlikely. And thirdly, infrastructure such as power is not reliable. So it's risky to really fully automate. So because of this, full automation is very, very unlikely. But however, some parts of, semi-automation, some digitalization, some automation is actually very important, and it will enhance the productivity of labor in general. So yes, there will be some jobs that will be gone, but it's not as fast as we fear, and there is a need to sort of prepare labor for the sort of changes that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey. Subsecretary Dennis, can you answer? The new technologies can create or eliminate jobs. And this is because new technologies and the 4.0 revolution create a new configuration of the work world. So you can have before you had a classical training course. Now you have to pinpoint exactly in a specific sector new skills, new competencies, and the control and dominion of new competencies that he can manage with the new technologies. So this means that these new technologies are eliminating jobs, but they're also creating and changing the jobs that already exist. This can make people quite can scare people, but if the process is done properly, it's a positive point for the economy and the workers, because they'll have a greater participation in the world of employment and work. I'd like to ask the same question to Emily and see what are the new technologies are used based on the presentation that you gave us. Emily, please. Emily? Another question has arrived of a textile engineer of Brazil, and she made a comment that discussions are focused on the development of skills. We should talk about strategies to talk about the behaviors of people who receive these training courses. As our colleague from Brazil, could you talk a little bit as how this behavior impacts on the training courses that are delivered?
And if you allow me to make a comment about this very interesting point, and in this context of new reality that we are living now, is one of the strategies that we're going to have to encourage regarding the issue of the attitudes, or the so-called, it can be called different names in different countries, and the soft skills. And the driver of these skills is related to attitudes, because jobs are going to change over time, and they're going to modify themselves and adjust themselves to the new needs. And I believe that one of the strategies that could be implemented within this framework uh, is the so-called reconversion or some sort of reconversion, which is not changing radically to a different sector. I remain in my sector, but I begin to learn cross-disciplinary skills. And we know from statistics that one of the main reasons for not hiring someone is related to motivation or attitudes, because after all, knowledge is a gap that can be filled with training. But what is more difficult to overcome nowadays is related to attitudes. And we believe in Peru that we are committed with it. And that's why one of the strategies now is to train people in soft skills. And we have a pilot project about it. So the question is, yes, this is a priority. And we should consider it should be considered as one of the strategies of the employer, which would consist in strengthening soft skills as part of the package of informations or as part of the reconversion. In short, I'm going to address the challenges that we face. I don't recall from memory, but I'm going to share with you in the chat so that everyone who's participating with us in the seminary learn about it. Thank you very much, Emily. Unfortunately, our time is up. And it was a very interesting session with a lot of interesting discussions. And would like to invite everyone to stay with us for the next session.
So I would like to invite the coordinator of the South-South Cooperation Program, Brazil ILO, Fernanda Barreto, who will act as moderator of this following session. Welcome, Fernanda. Please, the moderation floor is yours. Thank you very much, Nata. It's a great pleasure being here with you today. We have, after 1 year of a lot of work in all of the participating countries, we are able to host our seminars. So I'm very, very glad to see you all here together. In this panel, we will look at the main recommendations that were designed, the methodologies, and how these recommendations are thought to be implemented. We know that this is a very hard job. All actors in the textile and clothing sectors, workers organizations, employers organizations, and governments. So in this panel, we will have employers and worker representatives from each of the four countries: Brazil, Peru, Ethiopia, and Jordan. And right now, I would like to invite to also join our panel Fernando Pimentel, who is president of the Brazilian Textile and Clothing Industry Association, ABIT; Antonio Lisboa, International Affairs Secretary of the Central Workers Union, CUT, in Brazil; Yassam Al-Judai, Vice President of the Ethiopian of the Federation of Jordanian Workers; David Mojers, first Vice President of the Ethiopian Employers Federation; Lorena Jorena, representative of the National Federation of Textile Workers of Peru; and Lucia Chochoanka, directors of the Association of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises of Peru and representatives of the National Confederation of Private Institutions of Peru. Good morning, all participants. Good morning, Fernando. Fernando, I would like to start off with you. Fernando, we know that the textile and clothing industry have been participated very actively in the whole process of preparing the recommendations. As president of BEAT, I would like to hear from you. What would be the main recommendations for the future of vocational education in your point of view? And since we're also working with the project of cotton in decent work, what is the importance of this discussion for the cotton production chain as a whole throughout the world? Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you for being here. It's a very relevant discussion because it has to do with the future of people uh, and which has been deeply affected by COVID, as we all can be testimony to in our daily lives and as we have seen in our previous presentations. I would like to thank my colleagues who work directly on the projects, Rafael Sergoni, Camila, Luisa, all the ABIT team who interacted with all the participants in drawing up this document with Sinai, our partner. It is an integrative process of all of the studies that make up the body of an industry, a nation, a sector. If we look at what we have been doing to date, we can clearly see that the pandemic has contributed towards the accelerating the agenda of technology and sustainability. When we speak of technology, we speak of changes that affect us as human beings. And as human beings, even though technology is important, human beings are in fact the main actors in the future. So an association such as ABIT has several actors and projects, and now we're working in an action called Brazil Mais, Brazil Plus, which aims to strengthen small enterprises. And now I would like to highlight one issue that Beatriz mentioned, that there is no one solution for everyone. There is no one solution that is enough for each country, not even inside the country itself, since we have a large diversity within the sector. Brazil is one of the 5 greatest producers in the world. And besides the large institutions, we have small and medium institutions. So our greatest challenge as an association is mobilize, work together, and bring forth the best results integrated with the actors who worked in this South-South cooperation sector. And I believe the ecosystem in Brazil is able to absorb this project. We have Sinai, we have Sinai Setic, we have Sebrae, we have workers associations, employers associations, central associations for employers and for workers. And this will have to be an ongoing basis. The learning mode must stay on. Of course, this has to do with an evolution for workers and employers. So we come together in this agenda. So working with research institutes, technical schools, universities, the basis of a university. This is very clear in the pandemic. We will only be out of the pandemic after a huge overarching vaccination. And we will only be a developed nation with focusing on education and a technological and education basis that changes. So what I'm saying today might not be what will be needed tomorrow. So a philosophy book is worth the same today as it was when it was different. But a book on technology, maybe tomorrow, will be completely obsolete. So we really need to focus on the process. And this is where ABIT comes in. We have several projects that are ongoing, connected with all these sector actors, the universities, the government, researchers, workers, and with these recommendations that we can only have good results by working together is the real lesson of the pandemic. No one will get off by just pointing fingers. We're all together in this. So more objectively, that the recommendations that were made by the associations are not that much different from what is being done. What we really must do is accelerate these activities and make sure that workers and employers, that there is no alternative to vocational professional qualification for a better future, for more income for our societies. There are countries with far fewer natural resources than Brazil have reached a higher level of success than we have. And one of the tools that they have used to a large extent is education. Countries that were far behind us 20, 30 years ago are now way ahead of us, and we have lost our footing in this agenda. And when we look at our results in the great international centenaries, we know that we have been left behind, but we know what we must do. We have an interesting structure that is in fact set up, so we must work from a coordinated point of view. And the interaction of society and the demands that have been identified to the partners to this larger schedule forum, we will certainly design and work agenda with recommendations. These one thing is designing recommendations. The other work, of course, we do have recommendations. It was a in-depth work. So we have here as a result, design a common document that gives us what the sector sees as a future. We are currently redesigning this document, which is in fact exactly that, what we are still going through. The pandemic has come into our analysis, and what we have learned in the very, very painful process with very low growth rates. So bringing together, coming together, and having a state agenda that has to do with qualification, requalification, education, vocational education. We have a basis that will come into the work market, and also a certain body of workers who entered the work market that needs requalification. I started working in the textile industry in '77. At that time, the number of people working in factories were much larger. The looms were mechanical. They were 1 meter wide. Nowadays, we have a smaller number of people working with looms that are 2 meters wide at 1,000 rotations per minute, with a huge amount of automatic controls that needs new abilities. And I was really happy when I heard of emotional latitude. We don't need only the technical tools, we need the emotional tools to deal with all of this group of changes that affects our psychology and our future if we're not mobilized and looking into the future to work on that.
So to understand and bring the demands at the level of the plant floor or municipality or the state or the national government, so that the government, the country advances and makes some progress in the field of knowledge. And the recommendations are listed already, you all know them. So what we need to remember is to work on an ongoing basis, permanently and continuously, with the schools, the university, the workers, the employers, the governments, generally speaking. And education is the top priority that in our, the state needs to be truly present in education and health and the rest we can't speak about. So I'd like to wrap up, thanking you all for the invitation, for all the people who participated, and thank you very much. Thank you. Fernando. I'd like now to invite Antonio Lisboa to know the point of view of Brazilian workers who took part in the negotiations and conversations. What is the Brazilian workers' vision as to the recommendations that were validated? The first question we need to ask ourselves in this virtual world is, are you listening? Can you hear us? Yes, okay. So we took part in this process as that is an exhaustive process, as you said, Fernanda, with the participation of many players. And this process brings a very important question, which is the capacity that ILO has and the other participants here, this capacity we have to build a tripartite dialogue with the workers and employers. We have 25 recommendations. The trade unions will have to take heed of these recommendations also. And we need to deal with general issues also, because education, as our colleague said, is crucial to the development and the process we're going through right now. We have to, we don't need to say this is an urgent matter that we need to address as quickly as possible for the entire population. Another aspect we need to highlight is the importance of social dialogue. Social dialogue needs to be able to bring to the negotiation table and to the tripartite groups a conversation to face this world of changes, so as to bring very quickly solutions and recommend it. And thirdly, what I'd like to say is that the 2019 declaration is also very, of ILO, is very important. Why? Because ILO, and it was already mentioned during the different speeches, this declaration of the centenary focuses on valuing people. So we need to keep this in mind, that valuing people is a great challenge that we need to address, and not valuing markets so much. That needs to be clear. Firstly, we need to be aware that the world, because of the fourth industrial revolution, the world is changing, deeply changing, profoundly. And us, as a matter of course, need to, we human beings need to adapt. Secondly, technological changes and the evolution of technologies are something that humanity has conquered, has achieved. This is an achievement. And we need to put them at the disposal of people, and not only to the market and the profit-making companies. So to face this challenge, we need to look to the future of the planet as a whole. In other words, we can't look at technological changes only as a need to adapt to the market and make sure that the capitalist production progresses. We need to insert these technologies for the betterment of the life of people and the quality of life of people. Thereby the quality, therefore it is very important to use the strategy as at the heart of the strategy, the declaration of the centenary of ILO, and we, as part of the CUT, the workers' trade unions, we're now debating the textile sectors, and we need to remind that the trade unions are closely linked to the textile industry. At the very beginning, during the first industrial revolution, this is when the trade unions were created. So you can see that this concern continues. But some issues and questions are fundamental, Fernanda. We, trade unions, need to understand that technological changes are required, and we need to understand that the changes are an achievement for the humanity, and they need to be put for the welfare of people and well-being of people. This discussion needs to take into account all that was discussed now: education, requalification, freshers course, the relation with the communities that were affected by the industrial production, the production change, the relation with the with society as a whole. And obviously, we in this trade union movement, we work closely on that. We know that our role is to defend workers, with the workers' needs and demands. This is why we need to be so close and be in close contact on a continuous basis. But at the same time, we need to make sure that these workers are aware of these changes and these new technologies and these advancements, so that they can be all the more productive, and also be in condition to use these new technologies. What we can't do is transform the situation in such a way that these advances serve only for a very few and the great markets, and not the bigger bulk of the population and workers, and that are therefore outcasts from the consumer goods. So these are two challenges: to invest in education and trainings, and use the declaration of the centenary as a guide.
Thank you very much, Lisboa. It's a pleasure to hear you. And now, from Brazil, we shall move on to Jordan. So I would invite Mr. Yassam Adezai to tell us how the Mr. Yassam, you have the floor.
Hi to all. My name is Yazan Zubeidi. Actually, I came on behalf of the president of the Sector Skills Council. He has an emergency.
Okay.
Our council is a bit young. It was established in 2019. It's supported by ILO. And the good thing is that it's the first time as a sector, as a garment and textile clothing industry, we sit together. And we have also representatives of the laborers and from the government and from small and medium and big factories. So it was the first time we sit in a council together. So the first thing we did is that we did a study, a field study, to almost to all the factories in Jordan. And it was very important for us to do it as a field study. And so in order to know the needed skills, and also we did a field study to the to all training providers in Jordan. The training suppliers or providers, it was very important for us to know them. So we had when we had this survey, we had a very good information in order to know the gap between what is needed and what we have, and to know to know what is the relation between the training providers and the factories and what they need. So at the end of the survey, we found the most important occupations needed. Of course, everyone is they are classified, and almost we had information about how much is needed from each occupation, and we have this is we have also had a very good idea about the capacities of the training providers in Jordan. Unfortunately, we have there is a big gap between the training providers in Jordan and the factories for communication. It's very important for us in Jordan. This study is very important because we have a very high unemployment rate in Jordan. We have around 20% unemployment rate in Jordan. So this is very important information for us. We have around 80,000 operators working in Jordan in this industry. 70% of them are not local Jordanians. So this is so we need this is a big problem in Jordan. So but this study have give us a clear vision about the future, about the dialogue between the factories, the training providers and the government. So far we have developed 4 occupational standards in cooperation with the ILO. Regarding recommendations, as my colleagues from other countries have previously said, it's we all know it, and it's more communication with the private sector. This is our problem maybe in Jordan. the public-private dialogue, which is we are working on it, and things are improving. Hopefully, it will be better and better with the sector skills councils and with ILO. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Yassan. Eu acho
Thank you
incrível
very much, Yassan.
como num evento
I am amazed in an international event such as ours, we can access more than one country at the same time and be in very different places at the same time. Yassan seems to be in his car. I thank him so much for his availability, for being with us today. Thank you very much. So right now, I would like to invite our representative from Ethiopia. I would like to ask Mr. David Moses what recommendations they identify as priorities to be shared here in our forum. Please, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Fantastic.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Fernanda, thank you very much for having me here. I have to ask for permission right after my presentation. I do have another international Zoom meeting, so I'll be leaving as soon as I finish my presentation. But I am really honored to be here in this webinar and discuss about Ethiopia's textile industry and the challenges and recommendations that I want to put forward. So to give you a background of the Ethiopian textile industry, as you know, of course, in every culture, the spinning and weaving is a very old tradition. So the same thing in Ethiopia. But the first factory was established in 1939 in southeastern part of the country in a place called Dire Dawa. So the textile factory is known as Dire Dawa Textile Factory. And it is one of the pioneers. And being the first among many other factories, the sector is still one of the biggest employers and contributes one of the major value-added items in the economy. And the main product of the textile and garment industries in Ethiopia, including would be mostly like cotton, woolen fabrics, nylon fabrics, and cotton yarn, blankets, sewing threads, bed sheets, and apron. And the number has risen now to somewhat about 250 industries in the country. And more than 80 of them are placed in the public and private industrial park in the different parts of the country, starting from 2018. And most new investments are housed in the industrial park, such as my colleague earlier has mentioned some of the famous places in Ethiopia, as Bole Lami, which is in Addis Ababa, in the capital. And then in the south, in Hawassa Park, and then in the north, Makale Park, in the east, Kombolcha, and there are some private industrial parks coming up now, like the one we call it Eastern Industrial Zone and Velocity. So it is coming up, employing a lot of people, contributing good to the country. But Fernanda, I'll tell you one thing. I want to pull your attention, to what the government has been doing and what we are seeing as kind of a setback. So despite being given priority status by the government and receiving considerable supports in the form of tax holidays, and access to finance, among others, the performance of the textile garment industry has been below par, I can say. It's only achieving 50% of the job creation target that the government set in the last, and has been very slowly growing in employment, kind of aspect that we see. So in addition to this, the negative economic and public health shock of the COVID-19 has done a great damage to the sector. So it is the public health plus the situation in Ethiopia have a little bit given us a challenge. And also the global collapse in demand for garment has been witnessed since the first quarter of 2020, and following measures by the government to slow the spread of the pandemic. And also restriction on movement and economic activity have produced a widespread retail closures and effect throughout supply chain, including promoting factory production suspension and workers laying off. Plus, cancellation of orders has left some garment manufacturers unable to pay workers' salary. Now, talking about the skill concern, in the textile garment sector, the weak linkage between the industry and higher education, like the TVET and the theory-based nature of TVET system, fails to produce the skill required by the textile and garment industries. What we are demanding and what is available in the labor market, as far as the garment sector is concerned, don't match at all. I cannot say it is a zero, but I'll say it is below minimum acceptable range. And informant interviews suggest that poor use of modern processing and finishing technology, old machineries, low investment in the research and development, and lack of skilled manpower and maintenance are key challenges related to the training skilled workers. Moreover, high labor turnover in the industry park, mainly due to low pay and high living cost, notably housing rental cost, has become a critical challenge for firms, private firms, as well as international firms coming to Ethiopia. Lack of structure and institutional mechanism for knowledge and technology transfer in the textile and garment industry in general, and the industrial park in particular, has contributed to a low labor productivity and high workers turnover. Therefore, strengthening the system of education and training in high level skills occupations within the garment industry is vital. Areas of high level skill are very important to the sector, including production management and planning, industrial engineering, human resource management, design, sales, marketing management, and logistics. All these are occupational areas that it is normal internationally to address through initial education and training at the university level or the above end of TVT education. Also, one key challenge for skill development in the sector, cutting across all occupation level, is to establish systemic collaboration between employers and institutions providing education and training. For such functional relationship to be established in sustainability and structure of work to be assured in the placement program to arise, the government should develop partnership for skills and work placement along with supporting institutional arrangement. So in a nutshell, we have about 5 recommendations to make. The first one, skill matching should be well thought about. Second, technology transfer must be given apex attention. Third, improving ITC is a must. Fourth, short-term and long-term trainings should be popularized in the sector. The olden part of taking 3 years textile course and so on, we've seen it, it is good, but not working at the current time and period. The last but not the least, the 5th recommendation that we're making as employers of Ethiopia, a social dialogue between employers and workers is vital. I have heard one of the presenters, panelists from Brazil, I think, were talking about even strikes and so on. Well, before considering the strikes, why don't we have a roundtable discussion every time, every day, every morning, and see how we can solve our problem before it is escalating to that level of going into strike. So this is our recommendation as a Confederation of Ethiopian Employers Federation. And I thank you again for having me here. But unfortunately, because I have to leave to another meeting, Fernanda, I will have to apologize. And thank you very much. Good night. It's almost 7.
Thank you very much. Good evening. And thank you so much for being here with us today. We are running a bit late in the event, so I understand your need to leave. I thank you, and we're almost finishing our panel. Thank you very much for your participation. And now I would like to invite Lorena Chavera as a representative of the National Federation of Textile Workers of Peru to tell us how the process for designing these recommendations is coming along in Peru. And we understand that in Peru, we are still in the step of designing the recommendations, a very important social dialogue after. I would like, Lorena, for you to tell me what the point of view of your institution. You have the floor.
We managed to gather the employers with the representatives of small concerned and small companies. It was a dialogue that was very rich with a very enriching dialogue that was held with all players. This was very important for the workers to express themselves and tell their point of view and perspective of the situation. And they were able to answer some questions and transmit information that they wanted to pass on. And this information was included in the survey. So we managed to talk on 20, more than 1,000 points of subject matters, and we went down to 20. And we know that from now on, we shall be working together, because this is something we need to do on an ongoing basis and on a long-term basis, so that the
from our perspective,
workers are always
according to
included.
this study, one of the
So I
points
will make some comments
from
that
our
I deem
standpoint as
important,
workers,
talking
there is a
about the point of view
recommendation, a
of
part of the
workers,
research,
the
of the
workers' point of
survey
view.
that said
Firstly, they need
raise
to
awareness
make
of public
the
and private
companies
entities in
and
order
the
to
public
encourage the
institution
capacity
aware
building
of the
and the vocational
need
training.
of training and
as
vocational
workers would
training
like to mention
and
that
soft
it's
skill
also important to
training
raise
for
the
them.
awareness of the public
And
institutions, but also
this
the
is
employers,
important for them,
about the fact that when one worker
because when
accesses one
worker
benefit,
has
we have, for
access to
instance,
one
the Senat, which is
benefit,
sponsored by the
they
employer.
need to make sure that
There should be
the
also a
employer that
possibility
receives the benefit for the training
to
course.
organize the
This
working hours of the
training course is
employer so
delivered
that
to
the
the
employee
employees.
has a better performance. And there are technologies
And
that may help that. And many times, the employers
the
are not
employees
sensitive
are,
to the fact
a lot of the time,
that
people
the workers can have a
are
better
outsourced,
performance
and so
if they work only a
it's
certain amount
they
of
don't
hours.
let
So
workers
for
go
us,
out
this
of the
is very
factory to
important
do
to
the
raise
training course.
awareness
So
of
it's
the
very important
employers
to be able to have
so that
more
the
access to the
workers have the
supervisors
opportunity
who
to
are
be
higher up in the
sponsored
hierarchy
to
and
take
can
courses
establish
with
this
organizations
role
such
of
as the Senat. So it's
intermediate
important to raise
with
the
the
awareness of the employers,
employers
so
and
also so that the
enable,
employees
therefore, the
can have
workers to
well-defined working
study
hours. And it's also
and
important
to
that the
do the
employee has a
trainings
space
so that they have some
for
space for training courses, because
working. And as we are discussing now,
most of the
we have to
time they
take into
have
consideration the
difficulties
human factor, because the
in
issue of
obtaining these training
competitiveness
courses.
also has to do with the human
And
factor.
so you can see that the
Because we
problem
as
is a
workers,
human
we
factor.
have to keep our
We
pace
have
with the
to
technological
talk
advances.
and think of these
So we have to be up to
technologies,
date with the modern
not only for the
infrastructures, because
industry
we
and
as
the
workers
companies,
also
but for the workers
need
themselves.
to
And for that, we
adapt to
need
new ways of workers.
to make sure that
And
these workers are heard.
the employees
And
should
this is
be
why the trade
represented
unions are
by their
important to
organizations
help
such as
them be
unions.
heard. I think we
And
will continue
also
to
in our
develop
country,
this
we are
dialogue
developing different
with the different
phases in carrying
players.
out different studies, such as the one that I am presenting
And
to you
another
now.
factor too
And also, we made a survey
that came out in
about
the
the
survey
centers for capacity
is
building, be
the
it schools or
training,
institutes. And we would
professional
like to mention
training
that this
from
point is also
school.
important,
So this
because,
is
of
very
course,
important.
the schools should be technological schools to provide
we need to
technological
have
courses.
technical
And our
schools to qualify
our
these
young people can
workers
be trained,
so that they have a
starting at
specific
high school, for instance,
technical
that they could be trained
training
in something technical,
from
so that
the
they could leave the
secondary
school with some
level of
technical formation, with
education.
some technical training.
That
That
way
could be in
they'll
the
be more
textile area,
skilled
for
and
instance.
qualified when they
So I
enter the
believe that it is
market, and
important for the
they'll be able
government
to use the machines and the
to
equipment
pay
in the
attention to this,
sector,
so that the
in the
young
industry.
people can leave the schools with some technical
It is
training, so that they can
important
get some
also that
jobs
they
with
know
some
all the
training. So
techniques.
it's also
So we
important
need
that
some training
within our
centers.
companies,
And within the companies, it is
that they
important
have like
that they
little
have
schools, so that
like
they
a
can
small school
train the
inside
employees, so that
the
the
company
employees
for
may
the holding of training
begin
sessions
to learn how to handle the
uh,
machines, for instance, So it's
so that they
very
know how
important
to
to mention
use the
these in the
machine,
study and in the recommendations that we make in this study,
and
so that we can make these changes in the future, so that we can
how to
make
develop
progress
their
in this area.
skills.
Some other
Another
important
point
aspect that there was
is
in this
also,
survey about
and this point
the
also was
supply
highlighted in
chain.
the survey,
I
is
think
that
that
we
it's
need to
also
work with
important to address somehow
universities
and
too,
strengthen
so that
somehow the relationship between
students
the employee, the
uh,
workers, and the
work
supply
also with these
chain, or
workers and the
the client
suppliers and the
that
clients and the
buy.
consumers, so that we have a dialogue between all players, so that they can see the way the companies work, the way they interact with clients. And we need the participation, therefore, of company representatives in other countries for them to know the new technologies that are being used elsewhere, so as to, because some workers have no experience abroad, so that would be an opportunity to know how these technologies are used elsewhere. And also, the technologies need to be available to the majority of the population. And because they can, and I know a lot of work posts that were eliminated because, I don't know what word I could use, but they would need to, the employees should be in condition to qualify their workers in these new technologies, so that these work posts aren't eliminated. Porque this is a way to generate more wealth if we qualify these workers. I'd like to thank you for being able to participate in this panel and for being able to talk about these workers who are so crucial to the industry. Usually workers aren't heard, so this is a great opportunity. It is important that they have some space to be heard, so that everybody has a dignified life.
Thank you very much, Lorena, for the viewpoint of workers of Peru. We don't have much time, so I would invite Ana Maria Tijuanca and have from Ana Maria, who is President and Director of comparative, your point of view in terms of the main recommendations that are currently being negotiated in Peru. 5 minutes, please.
Peraí. Então, it's so that we can improve the best practices of these small rural and urban companies in Peru. And so that we make natural fibers available to the market. We have other challenges, and it would be extremely important to Nossa Senhora. I'm awfully sorry, I can't hear the trunk. We have a lot of professionals who have a deep knowledge of the raw material and know all the and this is very important because this generates employment in areas of poverty. And we also have representatives of ILO that I would like to thank the ILO for giving us the opportunity to express ourselves in the name of our country and in the name of Peru is a country where 99.6% of economic units are micro and small businesses. And these need to be heard by and helped by and have been helped by international organizations like ILO and also other types of organizations of the private sector. We consider that it's crucial to establish mechanisms to align the educational system to the professional training system and to promote the consolidation of innovation in the textile sector. We are sure that this way will contribute to increase the well-being and the development of the country. The employers values the certain types of professionals who know the technologies, and it is important that they know of the trends out of the country abroad so that they have mechanisms of transfer of knowledge to develop the processes and also the design. There is a need for new materials to meet the health demands in Peru. And there is also a need for the digital transformation, because without this, these new technology and digital transformation, there will not be a future in Peru for this sector. So we need to focus on these priorities, because the realities also, we need to adapt to the different realities of Peru's. The reality in the south is very different from the reality up north. So it is important to organize these areas to disseminate all the knowledge on technology and to increase production and disseminate the knowledge on the products and clothing that are put onto the market. So all these gaps involve an adaptation to the new technologies. And finally, an important theme for the sustainability of companies is that they cannot grow without the workers and without making sure that these workers are fully trained and know these new technologies. This is a moment where employers and employees need to sit down to work on growing together in a sustainable way. And this is why it's so important to have competitive workers. And so the way forward is to place the worker at the center of this dialogue, because we need to have the productivity for. And so I'd like to thank once again Ilo for being part of this webinar and for all the recommendations that were made and the information that was passed on and shared on the textile sector. But these can be used in other sectors too, in other countries. This, without you, our work would not be so successful. We need to work as a team so that we operate, be it in a town or of a specific country or in the countryside. We need to make sure that all the workers are put into a situation whereby they can develop their skills, and the employers need to understand that without them.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. Thank you very much for all the representatives of employers and workers. Unfortunately, we have no time for debate. Our seminar is drawing to a close. And once again, I would like to thank all of you who were with us during this panel and who also mentioned, as all
the social dialogue, which is the best way
forward
for
to implement these
to move forward.
Recommendations.
Thank you very
I
much.
would ask Nathaniel Lopez to take the floor so we can wrap up the event. Thank you very much, Fernanda. I think we're a bit over time, so with no further ado, I would like to invite for our closing panel, Martin Hahn, Director of the ILO office in Brazil and the Coordinator of South-South Cooperation with Trilateral Organization, Cecilia Malaguchi. Welcome. The Director of ILO will now support us with the challenge of summarizing the declaration. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. I would like to begin to once again thank, and on behalf of ILO to Brazil, thank the ambassadors, representatives of workers and employers, institutions from Brazil, Ethiopia, and Peru. I would like to thank the participation of our colleagues and everyone who was with us in this activity. Dr. Rui Pereira, in his opening speech, spoke about the importance of South-South cooperation to overcome the issues facing the textile sector. My colleague Vinicius Pinedo said that even though there is a pandemic, this is an example that social dialogue and building consensus in a tripartite way, sharing knowledge and promoting best practices between countries to promote decent work for all countries. We thought about several impacts on the industry. Alessandra said that at the same time, this crisis has the potential to accelerate going digital for the textile industry. She also presents us opportunities and shows that our works are in tandem with the Centennial Declaration of the ILO. And so I believe that the idea of foresight, the future needs, I'm very happy to see in my office, to be working from my office in Brazil, to be contributing to this group office. So summarizing such a rich debate is an impossible task. So I'd like to make personal comments. Our colleague Olga said that the future scopes of changes and their negative impacts in terms of employment. I would like to thank her, especially for her strong in defending that this work is important. The second session on methodology and recommendations from other countries, it was very interesting to see how each country dealt with building this recommendation distinctly. Some use Sinai recommendations and also seeing what they have in common. I thought it particularly impressive that the Sinai model of prospection, the potential it has to create a model of prospection and help us understand the dynamics of the best practices for jobs today. I would like to thank the Ministry of Economy for the considerations on our work and how it goes in tandem with what the government expects for Brazil. The ILO office in Brazil is at your disposal to work together in important projects as suggested. We also learned important lessons, the importance of sharing best practice, bringing together CEOs and directors from the industry to the discussion. From Ethiopia, we heard of the Council of Sustainability, which focuses not only changes in the industry, but also climate change. I was very impressive that they showed the drastic effects of this in both contests. Finally, when representatives from all countries, we could see what brings together and what tells the countries apart. The appeal on the importance of strengthening vocational education, of quality being part of a permanent state agenda will certainly push us forward. And it also pushes Brazil forward into the area of knowledge. I would like to thank also our representative in Lisbon on the kind words on the process, how ILO contributes towards this process. All of us agree on social dialogue and centering on capacity building for people, which is the central issue in the Centennial Declaration on work. I would like to thank the speakers from Ethiopia and Jordan, shared several issues with us. So we can see that there is large variety of detail and special regional situations. I was very impressed by how maybe together thinking about these challenges, these recommendations can push us forward to move past the hurdles we are facing. As a personal note, I would like particularly to thank the idea of a daily dialogue suggested by the representative from Ethiopia. The representative from Peruvian workers was also very important. This is a long-term activity, and we want to work towards her perspective, our perspective, that the recommendations become true and are put in practice. And I would like to assure you that I would like to say that thank the representative of Peruvian workers for her concrete contributions, and that there is a need to implement. Our work does not end today. The seminar today is but one more step in a collaborative effort that goes on with tripartite dialogue between countries for the industries of textiles and clothing. This seminar highlighted the importance of acquiring competencies, skills, both in Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru, in the chain of value for the textile and clothing industries. The ILO is at your disposition, I would like to particularly thank all my colleagues for the excellent collaboration between several departments and offices. The issue of the debate today will be consolidated in a global publication, which will be published. And I was very happy to thank you that the information that there are other countries in Asia that are interested in knowing this initiative and also having a seminar. And also I would like to highlight finally that South-South trilateral cooperation is a powerful tool for development, especially for developing countries, working towards decent and inclusive work for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Martin. It was not an impossible task. You gave us an excellent
representing the ABC and sharing this space of speech with ILO and the regional office of ILO in Brazil to hold this important webinar on South-South cooperation. Initially, I would like to thank the representatives of the countries participating in the seminar, Brazil, Ethiopia, Jordan, and Peru, which, with great aplomb and propriety, presented the prospective studies on the demand for vocational training in the textile and clothing sector in their countries. It is gratifying to see that international cooperation is an effective tool in the development and exchange of knowledge generated in each of the countries present here. Challenges have always existed, but 2020 proved to be especially challenging. I am honored to be involved in this endeavor and to have contributed to seeking joint and complementary solutions to continue cooperation activities despite the challenges imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The very holding of this international seminar leads us to believe in the success of the efforts in overcoming the obstacles. I believe it is opportune to highlight the fruitful partnership established between the Brazilian government and the ILO for the promotion of South-South cooperation. Formalized, this partnership is innovative and use cooperation on all the continents and is based on the implementation of decent work and based on 4 strategic pillars on social justice for equitative globalizations. Along these 10 years of partnership with Fernanda and this partnership with Ilo, we are sure of the changes that have been made and the advances that have been achieved. I'd like to thank you for believing that South-South cooperation does make a difference. All I can wish is long live this partnership. Finally, I reiterate the commitment of Brazil to continuing to provide South-South cooperation as a driving force in the promotion of capacity building and knowledge sharing in this sector, the textile sector and other sector, because this enables the achieving of the autonomy of countries while respecting local idiosyncrasies and the unique challenges of each country in their respective development process. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you once again, Martin, Cecilia, the representatives of ABC and ILO, for your closing remarks. In the name of ILO and IBC, I'd like to thank all the participants in this webinar and all the panelists. I'd like to wish you all a good day, good afternoon, good evening, and bye-bye. Ciao.
Internacional do Trabalho analisou os impactos de avanços tecnológicos, da globalização e das mudanças climáticas e demográficas sobre o futuro do trabalho e o trabalho decente nos setores têxteis de vestuário, couro e calçados nos próximos anos. Uma das principais conclusões é que formação profissional é um componente fundamental para lidar com desafios e oportunidades do futuro do trabalho. Novas competências são essenciais para garantir que empresas, trabalhadores e trabalhadoras possam se adaptar às novas tecnologias, aos novos materiais e à crescente necessidade de fabricação de produtos de forma ambientalmente sustentável. Por isso, em 2020, em parceria com o Governo do Brasil, organizações de trabalhadores, organizações de empregadores e da indústria têxtil, o projeto Algodão com Trabalho Decente elaborou recomendações sobre a demanda futura de formação profissional para o setor têxtil no Brasil. O modelo Senai de prospectiva ao setor têxtil brasileiro foi utilizado para identificar os cenários e as tendências das mudanças tecnológicas e organizacionais nos próximos anos. Especialistas de instituições governamentais, academia, organizações de trabalhadores e empregadores participaram de uma ampla pesquisa. Por meio do diálogo social, esse processo culminou no conjunto de recomendações com foco em instituições de formação profissionais, governo, sindicatos, empresas, instituições de pesquisa e associações setoriais. Assim, será possível desenvolver estratégias para fomentar o crescimento sustentável com produtividade e trabalho decente diante dos novos cenários tecnológicos e organizacionais do pós-pandemia.